Moving on to the next session, we bring you another very interesting Tech Pathshala. To do the honors, I would like to welcome Sridhar Patwari to share key insights on building scalable and resilient platforms. Sridhar is a Senior Vice President of Product Development at Rakuten India. He's a technology leader focused on product strategy, product development, team creation, delivery, sustainable deployment, and operations. Let's all welcome Sridhar. Over to you, Sridhar.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this session. My name is Sridhar Patwari. I'm SVP at Rakuten India and work on payment and ecosystem services. Brief about my company, Rakuten, you might have heard through various sessions already. Rakuten is a conglomerate of many businesses. In Japan, we have 70 plus businesses and another 20 businesses worldwide. And connecting this entire story is our platforms, which is ecosystem services. We build platforms such as ID, fraud management, payment solutions, reward management systems, and so on. I have a background in building platforms at eBay and Oracle, and glad to be here. So without much further ado, let's get into the session. Okay, so the scalability. Let's look into what scalability offers and the kind of humongous opportunity it provides to all digital businesses worldwide. This is a slightly old report from Cisco, which predicted that by 2020, we're already in 2021, and much of this data remains true. Any smart city with 1 million users will have about 200 million gigabytes of data generated per day. And as you can see, this generates many opportunities for many internet businesses, digital online and offline stores, connected commerce, and many retail and other supply chain operations. And while scale provides a huge opportunity, if it is not dealt well, it can also be a trouble. And let's see some of those cases. So before we deep dive, throughout the next 60 minutes, we will cover some of the key concepts about what it means to scale at web, some of the business trends, and some of the common distributed architectures that we have seen, what it means to handle the growth, what are its dynamics, and also get into some of the scalable and resilient designs. Much of my talk will get into some of these architectural patterns and how we can handle scale and handle variable traffic and peak searches and so on. And if time permits, I will also talk about how do we prepare our organizations for growth. So I would cover the session into three portions, one for engineers, one for product managers, and for all techno leaders who are interested in building internet scale of businesses. So the intent is for software engineers to learn how to deal with peak traffic surges. While many systems get built with the focus on feature engineering, we know that when systems go through a peak surge in traffic, they misbehave, they have slow responses and so on. At the same time, software failure in one system or one module creates catastrophic failures in the overall availability and functionality of the system. Just to give you some industry examples, this is a famous one. Some of you might know that Stranger Things is a very famous Netflix sci-fi series, and I'll talk about how a seemingly unrelated event can actually cause an opportunity and a problem. So in the series, the lead character wore this T-shirt of a dinosaur, and the museum in Minnesota, which was actually selling these sweatshirts and hoodies actually saw a huge surge. But when the surge happened at 8 o'clock, the time the Netflix actually aired the episode, people started buying these hoodies and it actually crashed. And and the museum and the IT team took next 4 hours in fixing it. I'm sure they recovered it, but they lost tons of business. So this is an example of how an opportunity can strike and very uncoordinated, unrelated events can cause uh, peak demand and how engineers can learn and adapt the systems to deal with this scale of data surge and user surge. So product managers can actually learn to see how to deal with scalability. Financial Times actually did a recent survey and a very detailed investigation on how the website performance actually affects their business. They deliberately introduced a few delays in the page rendering to see the user response, and they tried it with two sets of population. One population where the users were very engaged and very committed and loyal customers, whereas another population which is casual browsers looking for an article and probably routed through Google or some other news engines. So this is the data with highly engaged users, and they found that if the site has 2-second delay, the drop rate was actually 5%. 3 seconds and later it was 7.9%. But the best part is the low engaged users who were casually browsing, when they saw 2 second or slower response time, there was a drop of up to 31%. So if you're a product manager, please do pay attention to the performance and scalability as much as you pay attention to usability, user experience, and features. This is a report from Akamai, which actually studied the web businesses throughout the globe. And they came up with this report, and I have quoted it down below. So the essence of the report is that if the website is slower than 3%, 3 seconds, over a period of time, 53% of the user population will leave. Next, for managers and techno leaders, this importance of scalability and building resiliency systems will help do deeper tech investments, understand their users, be prepared for traffic surges, do the tech investments in building data centers, hardware, understand both hardware and software, and how they can intermingle and create a beautiful business opportunities. At the same time, how some of the monolith systems can be actually morphed into containerized microservices and how that drives the business. And definitely how to manage the team better, how to talk to engineers and to be on the same page with engineers and architects. And for techno leaders to avoid things like this, this is a report from Boston Consulting Group, which studied many businesses in the last 2 decades, and then they came up with this beautiful chart of what it means and at what stage of the business cycle the businesses actually fail. And it's very interesting to know that many of the businesses fail during the scale phase, not during the launch phase when the utility or the functionality is well understood by the user population. They are looking to adopt. When the adoption happens by the means of scale, and that's when they fail. While the launch is probably understood by many techno leaders and technologists, the scale is a silent killer, and it's not very well understood. And the third biggest reason for businesses to fail is the maturity. Maturity is, again, how do you keep scaling your businesses and keep adding the features and build a network model and have a greater network effect with the functions that you provide and the value that you create for end users. So this leads us to the question, why is scalability so important? Let's look into some of the data that we have seen and the surge of the data that we are all witnessing. So this is a brief report, and please feel free to go to these Domo charts. It exposes a lot of these interesting data. I've taken some summary from the data that is available. Apparently, Netflix streams about 404,000 hours of video every minute. Instagram does 350K stories every minute. YouTube creates 500 hours of video every minute. TikTok has around 2,700 installation, and Facebook has 150K messages shared. And this is per minute, by the way. So please pay attention to this, and I'll ask a question. One of the important aspects of dealing with the growth is how do you deal with growing user bases. And over a period of time, we have seen that the digital adoption is a lot faster. With that clue, let's see the time some of the businesses have taken to reach first 50 million users. As you know, telephone actually took about 75 years to reach 50 million users. Automobile, 62 years. Electricity, 46 years. Credit cards, 28 years. Television, 22 years. ATMs took 18 years. Computers took 14 years. Mobile phones, 12. Internet, 7. Facebook, 4 years. WeChat, 1 year. And there is one business, one service which took only 19 days. So here is a question for all of you. Please key in your answer that you think a certain business took only 19 days. I'll wait for your response. Sandeep, can you help me? Sandeep, can you read some of the answers? I can't see the chat.
Somebody has said stock.
Interesting.
Google.
All right, let's see the answer. It's actually Pokemon Go. So you can see that some of the traditional businesses, such as telephone, which took 75 years, now with businesses such as WeChat and Pokemon Go, from the time to launch to adoption can be very, very rapid. So it's very essential that when you build a business, you also build for scale, and it cannot be an afterthought. So what is the implication for technology businesses? We have seen trends where almost every business is transforming to be a technology firm. And Mark Anderson recently said software is eating the world, and that is true. Goldman Sachs, which is investment banking and financial service provider, their CEO recently came and said that we are a technology firm and we are a platform. It's interesting to see this. He's not saying we are in the financial business, but rather in a platform business. This is another good case of how a sports apparel company, which had a lot of offline stores, which is Lululemon, actually started investing in accelerating their digital platforms and selling directly to the customers. They started this journey in 2018, and there were not many takers, but the CEO was instrumental in making that change. And right when the corona happened, when a lot of many big retail stores closed, Lululemon actually increased their revenue by 60% and their profit by 33%, only because they were successfully able to convert their offline stores into shipping centers, and pretty much all business happened online. So now let's get into scalability concepts. So if you're a technology leader or a technologist, there are two things that you need to pay attention to. One is growth, and the second one is availability. In the growth, when we build the systems, it needs to deal with both expected and unexpected growth. Traffic can surge, and like we have seen in some of the examples already, the opportunity can come in a very unprecedented manner without any expectation. So our systems need to be ready for that, and also be ready for data growth. And sometimes we can't even expect what the data growth would be. There are two others, which is capacity planning and then to be ready with the feature expansion. Often we see the engineering teams struggling with capacity planning and expansion, at the same time adding more features to it. And in many cases, we have seen that many businesses struggle to make this scalability versus feature comparison a troublesome parameter to deal with. The other one is availability. With the global reach, with people all over the world looking for using these businesses all the time, even traditional businesses transforming into be a global businesses with no boundary between the countries, it is imperative that the services need to be available 24/7, all 365 days of the year. The service level agreements need to be very high. It's not just the software, but all the dependencies that you have. It could be a cloud vendor, hardware provider, service provider. So defining the SLA from top to bottom, all through layers becomes important. And the common expectation of a very conservative B2C business these days is 99.95, which means you can afford only 20 minutes of downtime in a month. So as you can see, performance indeed matters. Response times, network latency, and having a consistent SLA, all of them are becoming important for all internet businesses. So let's understand some of the dynamics of growth. And let me take an example of how we see some of these dynamics in our real world. Let's look into lily-pad and how the growth happens there. Let's suppose we have a pond with the lily-pad, and with the assumption that lily-pad actually grows and doubles itself in every day. So on day one, you will have one lily-pad in the pond. On day two, you will have two. Day three, you will have four. So now here is a question. Now the pond is covered with 50% of lily pads. Now the question is how many days it takes to cover the entire pond? Need a quick response from you. Please key in your answer. Sandeep, any responses?
I'm just checking on that. Murli.
That is right. It takes only one additional day to cover remaining 50%. So if you see the growth of lily pads in a pond, this is how it looks. So for a fairly long period of time, it looks very, very flat. And humans are not really good at understanding the exponential growth because it remains flat for a long period of time until you see the multiplication factor because of 2 raised to n factor. And then it is too much of a growth that people wouldn't have planned. We have seen one such example recently, which is coronavirus. It's a bad example, but I just wanted to bring some parity here. As you can see, between December and March 1st, it remained pretty flat. And if you are in March 1st, the daily new cases were about 11,000. It made everybody comfortable that we have solved coronavirus or Indians are immune and so on. But it is the same exponential effect that was going on, and the virus was actually multiplying. The last phase of the exponential curve we saw between March 1st and May 1st, and on May 1st we saw 400,000, which is 40 times the daily new cases as we witnessed on March 1st. So, and many times, we see people really surprised, and then they say it was all good yesterday. What happened now? So, and this happens in all internet businesses. So let's study some of the laws governing some of the exponential growth. Moore's law, everybody is aware. So it says transistors get doubled every 2 years. This is true. In fact, it has speeded up. We see more transistors packed in the same real estate of IC with lot lesser cost than it was 2 years ago. We are seeing the same thing in the data transmitted through the optical fibers, and this data is doubling every 9 years. Another driver of the internet business or any digital business is that there is this network effect or the network value, and there is a famous Metcalfe law which says the network effect is the square of the number of nodes in the network. So when it is small, it is 2 raised to 2 is 4. But then when you, let's say you have 10 nodes, and these nodes could be your computers, servers, or the real people. So the network effect is actually 10 into 10, which is 100. And if you add one more user to this network, which is 11, now the network value is not 101, but it is 11 into 11, it is 121. So you will see the exponential growth in your business value, your business proposition also, and the same will be translated into your data needs as well. Now let's get into availability, and in availability I'll cover the regular availability aspects of doing software business, and I will also cover resiliency aspects which deserve some special note. So why and how is availability very important? We see these reports very routinely. This is a very old report that I pulled. Amazon actually back in 2013 said that if there is a downtime for a minute, they lose about $66K, and Google actually loses about $110,000 a minute. I'm very sure they have these numbers have multiplied by at least 10x in last 7-8 years. So, but what is important is on the the chart on the right side. If you pay attention to, so in US, the US data suggests that the businesses lose about $700 billion because of downtime. And interesting aspect is the revenue loss that companies publish is only 17%, and there is another 70+% which is attributed to productivity loss. And this is the loss that the internet, that engineers, management, and the entire team is spending to fix, because they have not worked on it proactively, and now they are reacting to events. This 70% of the revenue loss that that is factored in here is not discussed, not published anywhere. So it's an important aspect to take note of. And also prepare your business towards a business contingency, and Rakuten has a lot of our 70+ businesses in Japan. And as most of you know, Japan is prone to frequent earthquakes. We had an earthquake recently last month with 6.1 Richter, and US is equally prone. The California is highly prone to earthquake disasters. These are some of the natural disasters that are quantified, but there are many unquantified and sudden natural disasters that can strike, and it's essential that you build a business which deals with these natural disasters. Now let's get into technology choices and how we can deal with some of these the variable traffic that happens. I'm using the word variable traffic because even when there is no surge, or even when there is no natural disaster, your business will go through these ups and downs. This is a case study done on Walmart. There is no peak traffic surge, or there is no event that is happening, but this is their annual projection. By the virtue of the various events in North America, Walmart goes through these curves of peak traffic surges during November. Some of them can be attributed to Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and so on, but these are variable businesses. So let's deal with how do we deal with this variable traffic that is definitely expected. And as you can see, to deal with this, you probably have to have 4 times more hardware and software capacity in the backend, and it would be incorrect to provision all of them as a one-time allocation or a static allocation throughout the year if you don't have the scalability built into your hardware or software. So here are some of the patterns, and it's a collection of many things that we have learned. I have learned in my 2.5 decades of career of building platforms. I'll share some of them. When you see the system slowing down or crashing due to spike in traffic, it's imperative that your backend should have elastic architecture. And these days it is very easy on public clouds or your private cloud, if it has the ability to spin off a container or a server based on certain thresholds. Usual thresholds are actually CPU, memory, or disk. You can put a quick threshold on when do you want to spin a container or a server, and this is very important. Many organizations end up estimating the traffic and allocating these fixed resources, hardwired integrations between the servers and services, and when the traffic happens, they're not prepared for it. Even if they can manage a server, it would take time, and they cannot respond in real time. The other one is how to deal with single subsystem failure, and that might actually result in a total system failure. And I'll talk about 2 cases. One is many of the businesses which are built in last decade or so, they eventually end up being a big bundle of software packaged in one a container or one big server and deploy it. So this, we call it as vertical sizing limitation. Those businesses will definitely get limited to how much of CPU and memory you can power, but this is definitely a troublesome. So please move out of your monolith model of doing software, get into a well-contained, well-asserted microservices, package them with Docker or any container technology that you may want to adopt. And the combination of microservice and Docker gives you a humongous ability to spin off as many containers as possible. If you're looking for a Kubernetes kind of a deployment, you can spin up as many pods as you want as the traffic surges, and when the traffic is down, you can bring it down. So it's also very cost efficient, and you really don't have to have a huge IT team to deal with these traffic surges. The second one is the health checks and probes. These are very, very important. Many engineering teams in their inception start building systems for functionality and features, but don't pay attention to health checks and probes. These are very important indicators of how your system is responding, and also give signals to the container orchestration components, such as Kubernetes. And if your health check can give this how your system is doing in real time, the container orchestration engines can actually spin up and deploy your containers and take care of it. So it's very important to pay attention to monitoring your systems, do systematic and repeated checks, and make sure that you fine tune these thresholds almost every month. So the other aspect of dealing with the variable traffic is the features. When you add features, and due to the network effect, it is possible that your product will see an explosion in terms of adoption. But it is also possible that during release or just post release, the system could get into trouble due to many errors, including the complex deployment model that you have, human errors, and so on. So it is important to have the blue-green architecture. This, most of you would know that there is an array of servers which is serving the traffic, and when you have the new features deployed on another array of containers and servers, and do all the health check and slowly start moving the traffic there. During release, if you see an issue, you can quickly roll back, and you have the working system already ready. The second one is please invest in canary releases. When you do the deployment, it's not necessary that you move all the traffic 100% from one environment to another environment in one go, but you can actually start doing small percentage traffic routing to the new cluster with the new features, and then see and observe how it is functioning. Keep a tab on the errors. If everything looks good, start with 1% and end up with 100%. You can actually go much lower than 1% also. And these deployment models are very easy, and you can use your GSLB to do the traffic routing, or you can invest in components such as Istio or HAProxy. Most of them are free, available, very robust, and then we use them routinely in our platform deployments. Lastly, feature flags. The important aspect of feature flag is that the business teams, the teams which are looking into the market competition, come back with many features, and when you engineer, test, and deploy from both functionality, engineering, and adoption perspective, it is necessary that you understand how much of GMV increase it is doing for the company, whether it is a feature that is enjoyed and loved by your customers. And you can start with a small percentage of your users, maybe internal, and slowly expand. And this is called as feature flags. And again, this can be done using the simple config-based deployment and keep increasing that. In many of our deployments, we do this, and we have built our own, native feature flag router based on etcd configuration. It's a very fast configuration management framework. The last one and the most important one is the data center failure. Like I said, we see them routinely, especially in the areas which are prone to natural disasters. So it's important that you have your services available in more than one data center with the different availability zones, so that when there is a disaster or if the entire data center gets powered off for whatever reason, the load balancer switches the entire application to another data center in another region, so so that your business continues and it's seamless. It's a continuation of this, but a little more emphasis on natural disaster. And in our businesses in Japan, we see this routinely. So it's important for us to have deployments in Tokyo region as well as in the Japan West regions. And when we do that, we make sure that our the vendors are completely different, different electricity providers, network providers, even the employees are different actually. So key takeaways, which is to pay attention to many manual activities that happen in your critical system. If you're a technical leader, pay attention to any manual activity that is going on, because it is an impediment to scale, which is also an indication that there is a static allocation going on. The team and the product is not ready for scale. It's the first metric. The second one is test, retest, and keep testing, and keep validating the availability and the resiliency of your critical system. Many times I witnessed that there is this testing that happens before the release, maybe the first big release, and after that it is sort of forgotten. And I'll talk about one case where this has happened, and of course you guys know many such disasters. So it is necessary to have an auditing system, whether that is monthly, quarterly, or once every 6 months, depending on the engineering ability of your team, engineering agility of the team. You need to invest in the auditing. The third one is having a system and a plan in place and not testing it is as good as not having it. And we have seen many cases that people have a backup systems, active standby mode of systems, but they are not sufficiently tested, or they are tested once, but when the disaster happens, there is no automatic transition that happens. Even the operating team is not comfortable to switch it over to the backup system, because probably it was tested 4 or 5 years ago. Now let's get into how do we deal with distributed data. Earlier we dealt with the traffic variable and surges that can happen, but data is equally important, and data surge can also have an impact to your business, including data availability. And in most cases, it translates to be your database availability. So one case of data storage or database surge that has happened between 2018 and 2019, Netflix has seen a surge from 100,000 streamed hours per minute to 700,000. It's a 7x scale within 1 year. And we know that 2020 and 2021, because of Corona situation, are a lot higher than what we've seen here. So how do we deal with distributed data and database related issues? A few patterns that I have witnessed, I'll briefly take you through. One is database slowdown that happens when there is a higher traffic, higher number of queries. Please invest in distributing your data across several databases, invest in replication configurations, thereby you're not dependent on one database system and its vertical scaling ability, but rather your data queries go against multiple database nodes in the cluster or in different zones, different regions, and so on. Second one is this is a famous pattern that you may want to split your write DMLs from read queries, and they have different needs in businesses, different transactionality requirements, and so on. So you may have write databases separately from read, and you may have multiple read systems and very few designated write systems. In most of the systems, in most of the internet businesses, we see that the read queries are much higher. 70% of the database interactions are read, 30% write, but this could vary. But we have seen a skewed behavior in many of the internet businesses where reads actually take much larger portion of the share compared to the write. So you may want to distribute the load between different databases. The third one is how do you split across multiple database servers? It's a very interesting puzzle. So it could be based on your user base, your user ID, and you may want to do simple hashing or sharding. It could be as simple as the first name in the username and then decide which cluster the database can go to. So now the question is, you have invested in distributed databases to increase the availability and to reduce the slowdowns. Question is, how do we deal if the database replicas are out of sync? Now this leads us to the CAP, and it's a famous CAP theorem where we know that database has three important aspects, which is consistency, availability, and tolerance to network partitions. And all of us know that you can deal with two guarantees but not three, and it's very hard to deal with all the three. Many of the relational databases are very high in consistency. Many of the NoSQL are very high on availability, and many of the caching and other systems are high on network partition tolerance. So this is the choice that we deal with. Like I said, consistency and availability you see in a lot of relational databases such as Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, and so on. And many of these are used where the transactionality needs are very high, that you don't want to lose data because something is not written to the disk in a persistent manner, or it introduces data inconsistency. But of late, we are seeing the rise of many availability and partition tolerance databases, such as CouchDB, Cassandra, Riak, and so on. At Rakuten, we use many of these AP databases to increase our platform availability. And the other one is CP, where the consistency and partition tolerance is high. We use Redis more frequently because availability needs of cache are lower compared to the other ones. It's also true that many of the databases, the relational databases, gave a perspective to the industry that financial businesses, payment businesses need to go for high consistency and transactional and atomic model, and when we see the use cases, that is not really true. For example, when we do transfers in India between two banks, it is not consistent, right? It gets debited from your account. It takes a few seconds to appear in the payee's account. So it is a messaging based and eventual consistency based transfers that is going on. But many of us continue to believe that many of the fintech businesses need consistency, but it is important for businesses to understand these use cases and start paying attention to availability and scale needs. So choices, I think, understand the CAP theorem, understand your businesses, relook at how the data storage and availability needs were handled in your business. And if you have consistency in need, then limit it to few transactions, few user flows, but please do pay attention to your scale and availability needs. So this is a quick summary, and if you're going for high availability partition tolerance schemes, there are multi-master databases available. Even the traditional databases such as MySQL are morphing in there. The new MySQL 8 actually helps you achieve multi-master, multi-data center deployment, and underneath they use a lot of eventual consistency algorithms such as Raft and Paxos, and these are really good algorithms to look and how they deal with messaging sequencing, conflict management, and so on. Building resiliency. This is important. Last year we have seen the number 3 stock exchange in the world, which is Tokyo, going down for the entire day. The entire team believed that they had a backup system, and it was tested once in the lifetime, but when the time came to switch over, the team was not ready. Rather, they ended up fixing the primary system but never leveraged the backup system. So this means it is imperative that resiliency should be part of your regular engineering, and to take care of transient failures, application failures, and lastly, catastrophic failures. So there are many systems available, and the closest one that we can relate to is circuit breaking patterns, learning from electrical engineering. So closed is the happy state that we want all the systems to be working. Open means the circuit is open, the traffic is not flowing. But it's interesting that we have a half open, which is basically you go and poll or ping to see whether something is up, and then restore the entire circuit. Or you may want to fail fast and stop the cascading failures happening throughout your system. This is one of the design philosophy that we applied in one of our platforms recently, which is if you are dealing with many complicated internal dependencies, and the systems are built all over the organization, multiple organizations contributing to it over multiple years, it is not practical to have a clean microservices architecture deployed in BCP compliant multi-region mode. You will have a system which is mixed in nature. So we were posed with this challenge, but we wanted to make sure that we gradually degrade rather than fail completely. So we have seen cases where one of the backend service actually fails, may trigger a much bigger one, but then at that moment, because of our routing thing, so we wanted to fail over to another data center altogether, but in a partial mode. It is not a full functionality replication, but all critical functionality would continue to there. So some of the frameworks that you can use, Hystrix provides good resiliency patterns. Gremlin we have used, it's a great tool where you can do define the blast radius and then figure out whether you want to introduce deliberate delays. kill the VMs and so on. Chaos Monkey from Netflix is also a good one. You could start studying these patterns. So I'm at the last leg of my session, so which is what is in store for the future of the web. This is simple data. So in 2019, we had 10 million 5G users, and we know that in by 2023, 1 billion population will be on 5G. And with this huge bandwidth and high speed, a lot of the smart city IoT deployments will go to exponential surge. So, question for all of you: do you want to create the future of large-scale internet business? I'll leave you with this thought. I'm passionate about building platforms and doing engineering at scale. If you're interested, please ping me. You can find me on LinkedIn and we can have a chat. With that, I would like to conclude. Thank you, everybody. And if there are any questions, I can take.
Hey, Sridhar, I think we have a couple of questions. A question from Santosh. Edge computing improve with e-commerce domain, what the challenges does this edge pose?
Sandeep, could you repeat the question, please?
Can the edge computing improve the e-commerce domain? What are the challenges does this edge computing pose for implementing in the e-commerce domain?
Fantastic question. Thank you, Santosh. Edge computing is something that we are morphing ourselves into. The evolution of the IoT will give rise to a lot of computing at the edges. And we have seen that in India too, which is, if you go through the fast track and toll booths, the payment happens right there. It's unfortunate that it goes through the entire network, but then these are the use cases. For example, the network hop from your toll booth to your backend data center in Singapore is not necessary because you can do that computing at the edges itself. So the complexity is basically your technology platform has to evolve from a traditional single database system into distributed database systems and many resiliency patterns to be deployed. So it is a huge challenge for all engineers, and we are going to go through many of the IoT and edge computing based things. At Rakuten, we have Rakuten Mobile, which is pioneering into not only mobile but also edge computing, where a lot of the local services and computing can be done with the antenna right there and then, and not necessarily go back all the way to the data center. I think we're going to see the same thing in India too.
Great. I'll take one more question. I think looks interesting. There are countries who are geographically volatile with natural calamities, like Japan being one. There are a lot of earthquake. How challenging it is to develop a resilient model in such unpredictability. Has Rakuten done anything? Any case studies on that?
Fantastic. Again, thank you. I covered a few patterns in my session. But I think it's all about designing systems from ground up. Many engineering teams pay attention to features and scalability. BCP and resiliency comes as an afterthought, and that's where, like I showed in the report from BCG, they begin to fail. But if we follow simple practices of containerizing and building microservices and start deploying, and these days there are many public cloud providers which give high availability zones within the same region, across continents, and so on. When the failure happens, there is a bit of penalty we need to pay, which is latency, but it's not very high, and businesses can tolerate. If you have systems to understand the circuit patterns, resiliency methods, then you can restore. So it's essential that these are part of your architecture and engineering and not an afterthought. And I think that will make a differentiation. What we have seen is many B2B businesses pay attention to functionality, but when the same business gets exposed beyond B2B businesses becomes a B2C, a lot of these architectural gaps we discover, and many of them actually can lead to the collapse of the businesses we have seen them in the past.
Thanks, Sridhar. I think we have 1 more minute. I will ask. There is one more tech question, which I would like to ask. What is the importance of the vertical and the horizontal scalability? How to ensure that?
It needs to be horizontal, everything horizontal, right? The previous database systems, operating systems, during our engineering, unfortunately taught us to get into vertical engineering, vertical size limitations. But many of the internet businesses, starting from 2005 onwards, whether it is Google, Yahoo, have taught us that we cannot get into vertical limiting or vertical sizing models. It has to come from horizontal scalability and going with public cloud infrastructure or private cloud infrastructure, whether they could be high-end servers or commodity hardware. As long as we have some of these platforms catering to the needs, I think it would work. Horizontal scalability is the way to go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sridhar. I think wonderful. The session nicely captured the scalability aspect and why it's important. Because there is been an undeniable disruption for the business. In fact, traditional brick and mortar companies have been forced to shift to operation into our online space, and this might have put a lot of pressure on the organization to adapt and evolve the online architecture. So scalable and resilient architecture aren't just a buzzword, but it's absolutely the imperative in the today's climate. Thank you once again for this session.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great day, and wish you fantastic sessions ahead. And feel free to correct me, Amar. Thank you.
Thank you.